Uh, let's start. Hello and welcome to all joining us today for this event. Good morning to the participants from Europe, and a good afternoon to all in Africa and Asia region, and also a good evening to some of the participants joining from some of the regions in Asia Pacific region too. My name is Suchitra Upre, and I'm the coordinator for the Global Network for Capacity Building to increase access of small-scale fisheries to financial services. It is also called the CAFI-SSF network. This network is an FAO-supported initiative, and it has been established since 2021, and it has been endorsed by rural finance stakeholders from Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean regions. The aim of CAFI-SSF network is to increase the capacity of policymakers, financial service providers, fishers, and fisher farmer organizations to promote, design, and implement appropriate financial services in support of small-scale fisheries and aquaculture. The vision of the network is to increase the availability and access of microfinance, credit, and insurance services for the small-scale fishers. The mission of our network is to act also as a platform where members promote, develop, and facilitate capacity building, knowledge exchange sharing, advocacy and awareness, as well as share the good practices and provide support and advice to stakeholders for increasing the access to small-scale fisheries. CAFI-SSF also contributes to the Sustainable Development Goal, particularly SDG 14, Target 14B, which states that to provide access for small-scale artisanal fisheries to marine resources and markets. Other than this, the network also supports and contributes to SDG Goal 1, that is no poverty, SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, SDG 9, industry innovations and infrastructure, SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, as well as SDG 13, that is climate action. The topic for today's discussion is a very interesting one. We have been discussing a lot on insurance, but today we are particularly focusing on the occupational hazards and risk coverage with a special focus on women insurance products in fisheries and aquaculture. And we are delighted to co-organize this program with the support of the GAF, that is the Gender in Aquaculture and Fisheries section of the Asian Fisheries Society, the MIN, that is the Micro Insurance Network, and the IDF, that is Insurance Development Forum. And we are also being supported by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to co-organize this event. So it's actually a very special event for us today. Together, we bring to you a diverse set of representations from the women member-based fisherfolk organizations, government agency, academic researchers, and micro-insurance solution providers to share their experiences and to also mutually understand the challenges as well as expectations, both from the demand and the supply side. Our aim today is to discuss key entry points that may enable and support pathways to develop women-centric insurance products and innovative delivery mechanisms to increase access to insurance services for women in the fisheries and aquaculture value chain. So with this, I would like to begin this program for today. And I would like to invite our first speaker for the program, Mr. Matteo Luzzi. So Mr. Matteo Luzzi is the gender consultant for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And his topic for today's presentation is contribution of women in small-scale fishery to healthy aquatic food systems. So Mr. Matteo Luzzi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Suchitra, for giving me the floor. Let me share my screen very quickly so that I can get through my very quick presentation today. Okay. All right. So first of all, on behalf of the FAO Fisheries and Aquaculture Division Gender Team, I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to join this event and giving the visibility that the challenges that women face in small-scale fisheries value chain face every day need, although at different latitudes and levels, but also to give visibility to their contribution to healthy and aquatic food systems. All right. Women are crucial actors in small-scale fisheries value chains. Not only do a significant number of women depend on small-scale fisheries value chains to secure their livelihoods globally, but with their massive participation in the sector, especially in the post-harvest phase, women make themselves vital for aquatic food systems. As you can see from the slides, with the data that we extrapolated from the latest IHH report, almost 40% of people involved in small-scale fisheries are women, with their most prominent participation in post-harvest sector. However, since the very earliest stage of the food value chain, or the fish value chain, the 15% of people involved in pre-harvest are women, most likely with net mending and boat preparation, fishing tool preparation activities. Also, 18.7% of people employed in fish harvesting are women indeed, mostly participating to intertidal, low-gear invertebrate fisheries harvesting activities, which makes more likely to make these activities unrecognized, unfortunately, as they are more often informal activities. Finally, in the post-harvest sector, women make up around 50% of the people employed, especially in processing, transporting, trading, and selling of fish. However, despite women's significant level of participation in those activities, opportunities, resources, and rights are not equally distributed in fish value chains. According to long-lasting and predetermined gender social norms, women bear a disproportionate work burden, whatever the activity they are taking part to. And in addition to this, they face many gender-based constraints. Some examples that you can see in the slides are displayed, preventing them from reaching their full potential in fish value chains. What these elements have in common is that they overexpose women to poverty. They make them more food insecure, and they also increase their financial vulnerability, which prevents them from having the same tools that, for example, men have to face, let's say, climate-induced shocks or occupational hazards, to just be in the same technical area of the topic that we are facing today. A person who is already financially insecure cannot afford to be absent from work for a few days or weeks, because that would be a critical issue for their income. So in a series of gender briefs that we have been recently developing with the SSF livelihoods team, we have identified some main needs and priorities to be highlighted at national level for each of those countries that we are working on. We have been working on, and you will see there are four main areas that we have targeted, like policy and legal framework, knowledge generation, behavioral change, and targeted interventions. You can see just a few examples under these bullet points, which are some of the key actions that we have highlighted at country level that we extrapolated. And the interesting thing here is that some of them are specifically related to the topic that we are talking about today. So financial services, credit, social security schemes, insurance, and they have been highlighted at different national contexts, in different national contexts. So this highlights even more the relevance of this topic with regards to gender equality globally, as these issues and these constraints that we have seen before are much more of a global issue. So we talked about gender norms. Gender norms have a subset of social norms determining roles, behaviors, expectations in a given society, according to what is expected from a man or a woman, more just to say it in a very simple way. As those norms have a huge responsibility in the consolidation of inequalities, gender transformative approaches, or GTAs, have proved to be the most effective ways to tackle those assumptions from the root. They seek to examine and address the underlying causes of gender inequalities, pushing for a critical reflection on roles and power dynamics. In this way, GTAs can remove the structural barriers to gender equality, challenge unequal allocation of resources in fish value chains, and finally achieve a more durable and long-lasting change. FAO's commitment towards the achievement of gender equality in line with SDG 5, but also in connection with SDG 14, SDG 2 sometimes, has been significantly increasing during time. By taking into account the FAO policy on gender equality 2020-2030, FAO's Fisheries and Aquaculture Division has seen the rise of crucial instruments and tools to be used for mainstreaming gender in the organization's normative and technical work, such as the voluntary guidelines for securing small-scale fisheries in the context, sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication, also known as the SSF guidelines, which is much easier to remember, and the handbook for the implementation of the SSF guidelines towards gender equitable small-scale fisheries, but also the Blue Transformation Strategy, which, despite the larger scope driving our division's work, has devoted several of its related set of targets and objectives to the inclusion of a gender lens into fisheries and aquaculture program work. In terms of publications, here you have the cover pages that you see here represent some of the most recent publications related to gender. Some of them are specifically related to the SSF sector. Here you can see in red the ones that I was mentioning about the series of gender briefs that recently came out, maybe in a week or 1 or 2 weeks ago. And below you can see other publications related to gender, which are not relegated to fisheries specifically, but they have a much larger perspective on the issues and provide some very important technical tools for the incorporation of a gender perspective in program work and in technical work. To conclude, for me, it's a pleasure to be here today attending this event, and let me express again my excitement for the upcoming speakers sharing their insights and knowledge. I think that not only they will provide us with a larger picture about social protection issues, insurance product and occupational hazards that women face, but they will also show us the multiple solutions that women and men across the globe have designed to fight against inequalities, proposing pragmatic responses and bringing up action for women to be recognized as agents of change in small-scale fisheries value chain and key actors to the creation of healthy aquatic food systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Matteo, for the excellent presentation and walking us through the gender transformative approaches adopted by FAO. So with this, we will move to the next presentation for today by Dr. Flower Msuya. Dr. Flower is the chairperson of the Zanzibar Seaweed Cluster Initiative, which is also called ZASCI. And her topic for today is occupational hazards of women in seaweed farming. So Dr. Flower Msuya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Suchitra. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right. Okay, let me share the screen. All right, so greetings to everyone. So I'm going to speak to you about occupational hazards that are faced by women in the seaweed industry and the role of the Zanzibar Seaweed Cluster Initiative in working with the women in addressing some of these challenges. In Tanzania, we started to farm seaweed in 1989, and we use an imported variety of two species, Eucuma, which is called spinosum, and Capaficus, which is called cottony. And we imported this from the Philippines in 1989, and we export our seaweed mostly to USA, Denmark, and France, but also to China, Singapore, South Korea, Spain. And we started exporting this seaweed since 1990, 1 year after starting the farming. The industry is quite large, especially in Zanzibar. In Tanzania, we have more than 30,000 farmers who are working in the seaweed industry, and well above 80% of them are women. So women are really the majority of actors in the seaweed farming. Our current production is around 12,000 tons of dry seaweed per year. This is for 2022 statistics. And the industry has proved to be a good livelihood enhancer. And for Zanzibar, it is actually a big industry because it contributes 7.6% of the GDP of Zanzibar. And it is also one of the largest industries that bring foreign money to the islands. We are farming two species, as I said. So with these two species, spinosum and cottony, the price of cottony is twice that of spinosum. And the reason is that the gel that values the seaweed, the carrageenan, extracted from cottony is better than the one extracted from spinosum. So the price of spinosum is half that of cottony, is only 20 cents of $1 US per kilo, and that of cottony is 40 cents of $1 per kilo. Now, that's the industry. Now, let's just look at occupational hazards and risks that can be faced by the farmers working in shallow water and deep water areas in the farming and processing. So this is the situation, what we see here, tending their seaweed farms. So they sit in the seawater for 6 hours. And when they are sitting there, it is under direct sun. So if it rains also, it will rain upon them, and they will be like that for 6 hours. And then when they are wading around, they're moving around, tending their farms, they can get cuts from sharp shells, they can get stings from organisms such as rayfish, sea urchins, and so on. After farming, when they harvest the seaweed, they have to carry the seaweed to the drying places, and the women carry the seaweed on their head. You know, so you can imagine about muscle pains and so on. If one woman can carry 10, 20 bags of wet seaweed for drying. And when the seaweed is dry, they have to store it at home. Most of them store the seaweed at home because that's the space that they have to store their seaweed. So the smell of seaweed, sometimes they get flu, even children or family members can get flu from the smell of the seaweed. So, you know, it's really some kind of risks that they are facing. And during the drying, when the seaweed is ready to dry, it shouldn't come in contact with the rainwater or fresh water. So if it is rained upon, the seaweed is bleached like you see here. Look at the different colors here. So it becomes white. And if it starts to exude the gel, then it cannot dry, which means the farmers lose. Actually, they just leave it there. They don't pick it up. So it is a big problem during the rainy season because the drying depends on the sunshine. We have a challenge of climate change, increase in surface seawater temperatures. So we are getting a lot of diseases and epiphytes in the seaweed. So disease, ice disease, here is the common disease where the seaweed is bleached, it becomes white, and then it disintegrates, the farmers lose the crop if it is too much. And also epiphytes, when the seaweed is full of epiphytes like here, so the epiphytes will kill the seaweed. They also make the seaweed vulnerable to attack by microbes. So in both cases, the farmers will lose their product. from climate change, what is happening is that there's a decrease in seaweed production. For example, in 2017, we were producing, 2016, we were producing around 17,000 tons, but now we have only 12,000 tons. And the high value cotonou we talked about is not growing in many areas because of the increased temperature. Some farmers are stopping the farming during the hot season, like this lady here, she's standing in her farm. It is a hot season, so she's waiting for the hot season to pass so she can resume the farming. So it is really a risk for the production for farmers. The seaweed cluster, working with different organizations, we are intervening on this by developing farming technologies. We want the farmers to be farming in deep water areas, especially during the hot season. So we have developed some technologies, but the most recent and promising one is tubular nets. We have a lot of partners. We've got funding from the Safe Seaweed Coalition or Global Seaweed Coalition now, and ORA, money was given to Aqua Farms Organization, who are our partners, and we are also working with Sea Power. So together we are showing the farmers to plant the seaweed inside the nets so that it will not break and they can put it in deep water areas. But there are risks, and when the farmers are working, when we are moving them to the deep water areas, because the women cannot swim. Most of the women cannot swim. So the seaweed cluster, working with all these partners, we are training the women how to swim and also supporting them to acquire boats so that they can reach the deep water areas. Otherwise, it is difficult for them to work in the deep water areas. So a lot of training, supporting for gear and so on, so as to build the confidence of the women to work in the deep water areas. We are also working on value addition. We are adding value to the lower value seaweed. So we started producing the first seaweed product in 2006 with one group. Now we have more than 30 groups producing more than 60 products. And we have created more than 500 small-scale processors who were not there in the industry. So the training now, we are continuing with the funding from Safe Seaweed Coalition and also from Schmidt Marine Technology Partners in the USA, which is a Schmidt Family Foundation. They are supporting us to continue training the people to make products. Now, there are also occupational hazards when we talk of, and risks when we talk about value addition. When the farmers are making products, for example, soap, they use caustic soda, which is corrosive. So this is something that to be careful, otherwise they can get affected. And sometimes they purchase, or most of them purchase oil and caustic soda from suppliers. Sometimes it is not good. Maybe it has been kept there for too long, or it is not the correct quality, so the products will not come out as they should. So this is economic loss to the farmers, and there is also limited market for the products. Now, we're talking about insurance for Tanzania. Until now, we do not have insurance to cover seaweed farms or farming, and also no insurance for the produced seaweed products. But there are prospects because the government is keen now on supporting the seaweed industry. So we hope within a few years, this will come out. But now we don't have insurance for this yet. So we need to make collaborative efforts, everyone, to support the seaweed industry, so as to keep these women in the seaweed industry and to ensure their survival in the industry. I thank you very much for listening.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Msuya, for giving us an overview of the seaweed producers in Zanzibar particularly. For all those who may not be aware, the global seaweed crop value today stands at 5.6 billion, and the major markets are also Asia and Pacific. And particularly, Dr. Msuya, thank you for walking us through the ergonomic challenges which are faced by these women also the production losses that they face during the rains and the impacts of the climate change that has happened so far. But it is also equally heartening to see that the introduction of the improved technologies that through the ZASCI project that you have introduced and supported these small-scale producers, women producers, and from a number of 30 to, so far 500 processors have been included and have been provided livelihoods. So thank you for such initiatives. And yes, we will keep discussing more. With this, we will move to the next presentation. I would like to invite Ms. Oluwafunmilola Shelika. She's the president of the African Women Fish Processors and Traders Network, also called the OFFISH Net. And the topic of her today's presentation is occupational hazards of women fish processors and traders. So, Shelika, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chairperson, for this invitation. And thank you so much for reaching out to us to know what exactly we've been doing, even in our own space. I think we're going to lend our voice to how much women really need insurance concerning workplace, occupational hazards, and risk that we face. Apologies, I don't have a presentation. Like I explained to Suchitra, I've been on transit for the past few weeks and I've not really settled in. As I speak, I'm still not in my homeland. I'm somewhere around the globe. But I'll be talking through the topic that I'm asked to talk about, which is the occupational hazards of women in fish processing and traders. Firstly, let me give a brief background of what OFFISHNet does. OFFISHNet is the African Women Fish Processors and Traders Network. It is a continental body, but I'm the chairperson of the Nigerian chapter. And OFFISHNet came into being in August 2017 by AU IBA. It was created by AU IBA, that's the African Union Interbureau on Animal Resources. They saw that the voice of women in the processing and trading in the small-scale fisheries and even in the fisheries sector was actually not heard. And they needed the women to be visible, aligning with the gender agenda of FAO and the UN. And really that was how OFFISHNet came into being. And the overall objective of OFFISHNet is to contribute to a gender-fair society, a gender-responsive fisheries sector in Africa as a whole that recognizes, utilizes, and also enhances women's capabilities and potential for sustainable and potentials for equitable development. I was happy when Matteo took his presentation. He talked about the percentages of women that are involved in small-scale fisheries and actually in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. And really that cannot be looked at as a small number of people in that space. And that is what OFFISHNet has been trying to do, trying to develop food security, poverty eradication, and safeguarding of the environment. And he also tries to contribute to the enhanced knowledge of generation and dialogues between policymakers, civil society, and scientists in order to develop fisheries and related policies that better account for environment and realities of what we have nowadays, putting in mind the climate and every other thing that is going on around the world. And really, what OFFISHNet does is to strengthen the organizational capacity of women in working organizations in a nationwide, in a continental base function. And in places that they already exist in, where they already have existing women network in processing and traders, they try to strengthen them. And also those that are not existing, they tend to start up that organization for them so that women could actually come together, lend their voices, let them be heard, their challenges, how they could actually exchange knowledge sharing, capacity building, technologies, and all the likes. And so in the past few years, we come together for a General Assembly whereby we exchange different countries. We, like Nigeria, get to share their own technologies with the women in Malawi, with the women in Uganda, to see how they are doing their own processing and how they can improve in what they are doing. Going straight to my chat for today, we're talking about the major occupational hazards and the risk that women face during their work. In fisheries and aquaculture, we have women that actually work directly on the boats, while aquaculture are for those that actually have their ponds and are producing the fish. And so the hazards that they are exposed to are quite different because they are in different fields of the same fisheries and aquaculture. And for those that are on the water, most of the time, they get injuries either from the deck or from sharp objects that are on the boat with them, where they stay, maybe when the men bring out the fish from the water and they get to take it on board to go and process it, taking them out from the nets and the likes of them. So some of them they sustain injuries from there. And also when they have to stand for so long, it affects their musculoskeletal what's it called, system, because they're standing for too long, and we know that is not really good for women at the end of the day. And then they get to lift heavy equipment, lifting the where they put the fish into to carry it to their own processing plants and the likes of it. They get to lift all those heavy baths and all of that, the vats that they have their fish in it. And that also affects their spines, and it gives them a lot of body aches, and it actually stresses their body too. And for those that are actually in the processing, fish handling is actually a major issue, because the fish have their fins, their scales. While they're trying to take out the scales, the equipment they're using to take out the scales could cut them. Even the fins of the fish could actually pierce their skin. And so most of the time it causes skin rashes. Then also when they have to process using the charcoal or using the other archaic technologies or the other traditional technologies, I beg your pardon, this causes redness of the eyes because they're exposed to fire. And then inhaling the CO2, which is carcinogenic. These also have its own effects in their bodies because it leads to cancer of the lungs and so many other diseases that they could actually get from working out there. And another major one for those that are really working in the factory is that the possibilities of the fish getting burnt. And if that is not insured, it leads to post-harvest loss. And also those that also come in with that farm the fish, after when they've harvested their fish, if they don't have a cold storage, it also affects them. It leads to post-harvest losses, because I remember one of our landing sites in Nigeria that they had to bury up to 2,000 tons of up to 1,000 tons of fish a ton of fish that they got, because they could not refrigerate and it was already going bad, and they couldn't process it immediately because they were tired. So they had to just bury it by the seashore, which could also lead to an outbreak in that community. So those are the hazards that these women are actually exposed to while they are working. And concerning support for financial services, well, they've not really had so much support because most of us, we're still working on, we write up for, some of them have gotten grants. There's a particular settlement in Nigeria, it's called Sabokoji. In Sabokoji, they have a cooling system that they use right now, and they also have a solar powered drying equipment that they use, which is to help them reduce the stress that the women go through. So really, AUIBA has been supportive, FAO has been supportive. Right now in Nigeria, we have the Fish for ACP project going on, which is to look at ways to improve the livelihood of women in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. And like I said about the most big plants, that most of them are not insured. Talking about insurance, in Nigeria, I could say we have some insurance companies. We have the Nigerian the National Agricultural Insurance Scheme, whereby women are to, people in the agri sector are to register with them and start paying a stipend to get their businesses insured. And also there's another insurance company called NEM. It's a private owned insurance company. But I think majorly processors are not covered in insurance. They cover most of those that are producing in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, but processors are not yet insured. They don't have a product for them. And another major thing about insurance is they're not really doing so much in sensitization and letting these women know why they really need to be insured. Maybe they're looking at them as, since they're small-scale fisheries women, that they might not have what it takes for them to be insured. So I think we are expecting that some of these products will be developed to meet the needs of these women. But firstly, like I'd always advise, there has to be a need with what is needed. There are insurance companies to the rate at which women with any health hazards depend, and then they can be treated to a particular level once they get some kind of diseases on the job and all of that. So that much I can say about insurance in Nigeria and for OFishNet. And I know majorly, OFishNet as a body, we've not really had so much as to ensuring women in the processing and trading aspects of our businesses. So I'm just hopeful that very soon more products will be developed that's going to help women in the small scale fisheries to protect their health, to be as a compensation for their jobs and for their factories and also the equipment that they're using, so that in the place of any accident, maybe their factory gets burnt or their products get burnt, they can get compensations so that they can continue in their line of businesses. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelika. That was quite insightful to share the challenges faced by the women processors, and specifically related with the physical and the biological injuries that they face during their occupation. And also to highlight the gaps that needs to be addressed more at the policy level within Nigeria to support the women processor and the fish processing industry in general. So thank you once again for joining us, Shelika. And with this, we will move to the next presentation. It is by Ms. Maryam Mbui. Ms. Maryam is a fisheries officer from Kenya Fisheries Services. And her topic for today is mainstreaming occupational needs of fisherwomen, giving a perspective from Kenya. So Ms. Maryam, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Dugi will have to share her slides. Maryam?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Your presentation is ready.
Yeah. So my topic today is mainstreaming occupational needs for fisherwomen, perspectives from Kenya. I will be talking broadly on 4 major points. That is overview of women engaged in various fishery value chain activities in Kenya, major occupational hazards and risks faced during the work of women, and the support that has come from financial institutions, as well as expectations from insurance agencies. So overview, in Kenya, there are 5 main value chains for women. We have production, which is divided into 3 categories. Capture fisheries, where women are mostly engaged in octopus fishing, bechelema fishing, and cowrie shell collection. And then we have mariculture, where they culture crab and also do seaweed farming. And then we have the actual aquaculture, where it is done in either in ponds or in cage cultures in the lakes and rivers. We also have the transport value chain, where most women are boat owners. They own boats, they own fishing vessels used for fishing, or the transport boats used to transport fish. There are also fishers, there are also women who are truck drivers in the transport value chain. And then in the processing value chain, most of the women in Kenya are small scale processors. Mostly they use traditional methods such as smoking, salting, and drying. And some deep fry the fish for sale along the roads or in areas where there are a lot of food coverage. And then we have people who are employed in the processing plants, where they take part in the various roles in the industries. And then we have wholesale and retail marketing. Women are owners of shops that sell fish in wholesale or retail. And then we have fish value addition as a value chain. They engage in value addition of fish and they sell it in fish sausages, fish burgers, fish balls, and things like that. So those are the main fish value chains in Kenya right now. Occupational hazards faced by women, bruises and cuts from coral and oysters, like octopus fishers. Mostly they go cleaning when the tide is out, so they catch the octopus using some sticks, and most of the time are barefoot, so they are prone to cuts and bruises from corals and oysters. Then we have eye injuries or blood vision or even sometimes blindness, because these people can go out there in the sun for like 6 hours or even the whole day. So most of the times they have vision problems. And then we have skin allergies. We all know a long exposure to the sun can have problems on our skin, and it can even sometimes lead to cancer due to the unprotected, exposure to the ultraviolet rays. And then we have stings from marine animals, like the rays. This is actually one of the biggest challenges, even for men. And a sting from the stingray is very bad for them, and it takes quite a lot of time to heal, and it is very painful. And sometimes it can even lead to disability when it is not taken care of properly. And then during smoking, when they inhale that smoke, when they smoke the fish or the octopus, sometimes it leads to respiratory problems or even eye problems due to the long exposure of the smoke. Even the tool operation, the tool that they use to fish, like I've said before, the spear, when mishandled, can lead to serious injuries. And then during fish handling, the spines and fins can cause injuries on the hands if they do not have gloves. And then muscle problems as well. When they fall due to the slippery rocks or the lifting of heavy loads during the day or during their work, they can lead to backaches and pain, and then depression due to lengthy periods of stress and fatigue. Yeah. And then support from financial services. In Kenya, mostly, they are just small-scale women microfinance, where women are being encouraged to save and then get some loans or get fish inputs in terms of credits. They can be given like a freezer or a cooler box or some engine on credit, and then they pay in installments. In Kenya right now, there's a World Bank funded project, Kenya Marine Fisheries Socioeconomic Development Project, where women are encouraged to form common interest groups of members between 15 to 30, and then they apply for grants, and they're given grants between 1 million to 3 million so that they can support themselves in fisheries-related activities. If it is fish inputs, it is fish harvest input like freezers and cooler boxes. If they want modern processing equipments, instead of using logs or smoke, they can get modern smoking kilns and things like that. But in terms of insurance, in Kenya right now, there is not so much that has been done in fisheries-related products. Expectation from insurance services. For this, I had to talk to some few of the fisher women, and this is what they told me they would expect from insurance service providers. Understanding the need, the insurance has to understand the needs of the women, what exactly is needed for them to develop good products for them. You should have personalized insurance products. Like, let's say, for example, there are people who might have more money and people have less money. And most of the times, insurance products also focuses on the people who are more privileged, like they have more money. So it was like, even the people who with less money, they should be considered and their needs personalized at their level. And then we should have products that effectively solve the available challenges, not just, a tip of the iceberg. Should come down to every detail of the challenge. And then excellent communication. There has to be quick response and multiple numbers in case of anything to help. And then there should be an aspect of saving and borrowing for liquidity. And then corporate social responsibility, whereby the insurance products can give back to the community in terms, like where I work in Lamu, so most of the time, NGOs or institutions support the community there by providing scholarships. The people around that community are not very privileged, so they can be supported through scholarships or bursaries or other community things like construction of water tanks and things like that. And then day-to-day transacting, like M-Pesa in Kenya, you can easily save and you can easily withdraw. And then there should be a plan for healthcare in the insurance product. And then the insurance product should also try to mitigate losses due to theft, climate change, and natural disasters. Like maybe a boat has gone fishing and it has sunk. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maryam, for highlighting the hazards that have been faced by these women, especially during the gleaning and the various musculoskeletal disorders, including the effects of it goes down to depressions too. So it's not just physical, but it is also got to do with the emotional and the mental issues that is there. But it is also heartening to note that you, Maryam, took the time to discuss with women to understand their needs and expectations of how, insurance products potentially can be customized. And it's not just about the insurance for the rich and affording, but also for the absolutely vulnerable who need to be protected. So thank you so much for joining us, Maryam, and giving us this overview for particularly from the Lamu region that you mentioned. So, with this, we would like to move to the next speaker. It's Ms. Kavina Tumbaga. So, Dr. Nikita, has Kavina joined?
I don't think she has joined. I can't
Okay.
see her list of participants. I think we can move on to the speaker.
Sure. Okay. So sorry, I think she is, she's not able to join maybe, or she's busy. Maybe she'll join us later. So I think we will move to the next presentation by Mr. Graham Clark. Mr. Clark is the chairman and the CEO of Asia Affinity Holdings Limited. And Mr. Clark is going to share his experience on the particularly micro insurance solutions for women, small-scale aquaculture producers in Indonesia. So, and I think Dr. Graham today is joining us from Australia. He's been busy in a meeting, but I think he's kind of taken the time out to join us for this. So, Mr. Graham, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chitra. Good evening, everybody. I'm Graham Clark. I have to correct one thing in the circular that came out. I'm actually not a doctor of anything. It would be very nice to be a doctor, but I'm just a plain mister. But I hope that some of the things that we can tell you about our work in Asia and what we're doing, particularly in the seaweed sector in Indonesia, will provide some food for thought, but also some food for collaboration, and particularly the presentation from Dr. Flower, because I think we're both in the seaweed business, so I think there's probably a lot of synergy. Okay, let me see if I can share my screen, and then we can start. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, let's just see if we can get. There we go. Our business has in its roots financial services, and it was financial services that first brought us into the micro sector and looking at what we could do to support communities. Originally from following disaster. So our initial work was within Indonesia after the Aceh tsunami, looking at how we could build capacity and a way to stop or to provide protection should the same thing happen again. What I want to talk about briefly today is the way that we look at micro insurance and micro communities in what we call an ecosystem approach. The world that we live in today is about connected ecosystems. It's no longer about just producing, let's say, octopus and selling it to a trader. It's about ecosystems. So if you look at the way that Amazon delivers a package, that is an ecosystem. All the providers are connected. And so we look at if we're going to make an impact in small community business, we need to adopt what we think called as an ecosystem approach. So that's what we're looking to try and do. Ecosystem most importantly, technology today is radically changing the way that we reach, we touch, we stay engaged, and we build our customer and our consumer relationships. This eco approach is absolutely underpinned by that. And the technologies that are there can help us facilitate change. The cynical amongst us would say, well, why are we looking at this now? In the world that we live in, where we're primarily looking at in Indonesia, we're working with some pretty stark data sets. We estimate that by 2050, 600 to 1 billion people are going to be impacted by by climate change. Whether this is not just related to coastal communities, that is all communities. If we were to add Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America in there, that number would be very, very much more. So change needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. Within our own environment in Indonesia, we're working in a country of 280 million people. 42% of adults have no access to have not completed secondary education. So there is a massive education need. And even for those who are banked, which is just over 52%, 60% of those are underbanked. So there is a huge issue and need to look holistically at how you bring about change. And importantly for our model, you cannot solve any of those stats, any of those figures, just by selling an insurance policy. It doesn't do the work. So we need to look more broadly at what it is that we need to do to make impact. And this is the rationale for our model. And this is something that we've learned in our experience in trying to work with microfinance institutions in particular, working with communities where the earnings are less than $2 a day. At that level, there is no interest in protection. They need it, but they haven't got the financial wherewithal. So a different solution has to be found. In our model, the reason we adopt an ecosystem approach is because we have some very strong beliefs that climate resilience, equitable access to financing, and I stress there the word equitable. We don't like rates of 25, 30% on micro loans. So equitable access to finance and a quality education are not privileges. They are fundamental human rights, and every child and every person should have access to them. So this is an underpinning belief within our ecosystem, and with what drives some of the changes that we're trying to bring about in a small way with the work that we're doing in Indonesia. We have within structurally, we're looking at 3 areas to try and impact in one solution. KMB is our holding company for impact. So that drives all the underlying businesses. So we have a business in Indonesia called Mari Oceans, which is our climate initiative. That is a cooperative model designed for seaweed farmers. We have a finance aspect, which is working with a non-profit foundation that is building capacity in the microfinance sector. So that provides the links to the last mile communities. Underpinning all of that is digital education, because there's no point in selling a policy or providing climate relief unless it's sustainable. And without the education, it's not sustainable. KMB is actually from the Bahasa, Kita Maju Bersama, which simply means let's grow together. We look at KMB as being the mothership that looks holistically at what we call last mile community problems. Issues there that need to be addressed. We cannot look at this in terms of just saying, can I sell a policy to prevent accident or drowning or health? We need to look at the broader piece of where protection sits within the overall value chain. And I think this comes back, or should come back very importantly, to a lot of the work that the FAO does, because this is, at the end of the day, is about rebalancing value chains. That is the way that we look at it. I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes looking at what we've done with our Seaweed initiative. This will be very, very familiar to Dr. Flower. Now, young Asep, whose photograph you can see there, is holding in his hands Capaficus, which is a product for carrageenan. This product sits in virtually every form of food preservative used today. It is also in use in the pharmaceutical industry and in the cosmetic industry. More importantly, perhaps, so not only does it have a food need, And our drive for Maori Oceans, first of all, was food security 2050, what we can do to contribute towards that. But the other piece is climate. And with seaweed, it's a very large absorber of carbon. The carbon piece at the moment, we are funding a 4-year PhD program in Deakin University in Australia that is actually measuring carbon sequestration. So once that program is finished at the end of the year, this year, we'll be able to say with academic proof exactly how much carbon is being sequestered from the farms that we are operating in Indonesia. The model that we've used on this for our farmers, when we decided, first of all, that we wanted to look seriously at aquaculture and seriously at seaweed, fortunately, our financial services background kicked in, and we took out a year and mapped the end-to-end value chain for the seaweed industry in Indonesia. Indonesia is the world's largest grower of tropical seaweeds. So when we did our mapping exercise, we looked at everything from seedlings, from the way that it worked, how the farmers took their seedlings, what the growing environment was like, how the cultivation was managed, and how it was ultimately dried, stored, and exported. So we looked and mapped the need for every single stakeholder. That went from the seedling producer at the beginning right the way through to the off-taker. That could be, a Cargill or a Nestle or a Mars or whoever was using seaweed at the end of the chain. And then we started to define what is the need. What are the bits that we need to change in this to rebalance the value chain and to make it sustainable? Now, you may be able to see in that middle photograph there on the slide, that yellow object sitting in the water is a high-end sensor. That high-end sensor gives IoT data on temperature, turbidity, pH levels. This is what enables us to mitigate risk. So referring to Dr. Flower's issue earlier on about the problems of disease, epiphytes and ice disease, this gives us the ability to measure water temperature. And if it starts to get close to the danger zone, we harvest. So that means we can begin for the first time using technology to mitigate, to assess and mitigate risk. This has a huge impact. It's just ordinary technology, but it has a huge impact on how it can be used. So I think in terms of being able to look at the end-to-end value chain, we tried to look at how it would work and what the interest was of each person. Within that value chain currently, there is no liquidity. Nobody funds, nobody finances seaweed in Indonesia other than traders, other than the middleman. Financial institutions won't fix it. This is what we're looking at. This is the piece we're seeking to address. So technology is a very big part of that, because once you can, with this sensor, for instance, once you can assess risk, then you can mitigate it. Once you can show to a finance company or an MFI what is being grown, when the harvest is due, where your purchase order is, for the first time, seaweed becomes financeable. And this for a new commodity, and a commodity of the scale that's needed globally, if we're going to support the food needs of 2050, is a really important thing to be able to do. So I hope that gives you an idea. All of this is built around a cooperative model. One of the things we found right at the beginning, our farmers are good at farming seaweed. They know how to farm seaweed. What they're not so good at is managing a business and scaling a business operationally. So the cooperative framework allows us to provide those skill sets and provide that training. And most importantly, it enables us to provide the upside in terms of increasing earnings for the farmers themselves and their families. So this was a big issue. We do a lot of work within the cooperative space, but that cooperative framework also gives us the ability to deliver finance through a microfinance license. It also gives us the ability to deliver protection products. Every farmer that is in our cooperative has life insurance, they have accident insurance, and importantly, they have catastrophe insurance in the event of an earthquake or cyclone or typhoon. So this is very important. The fact that we've chosen this as a model is really important. Within the overall ecosystem, we're still developing, but we have the outlines for this operational already. Using technology to show how the seaweed is being grown, where it's being grown. When we first did our problem statement on seaweed, there were two issues. Farmers, there was no track and trace. So the buyers couldn't say that they were sourcing their seaweed sustainably. Today, this is a major issue. For the globals, they are at board level, they have enormous pressure. Are you sourcing sustainably? Where are you sourcing from? Most of them can't tell you because they're trading with middlemen. So they have no idea where the seaweed is actually coming from. So the first need was to find a track and trace system that would track seaweed from the growing stage at a seedling level through planting and harvesting, right the way through to delivery to the ultimate buyer. It wasn't easy to do. The farmer, of course, has absolutely no interest in terms of traceability. All they want is to get paid and hopefully get paid more. But the end user has a big need. So the ecosystem was underpinned by technology. This threw off all kinds of additional data, which helps you refine and grow the model. Once done, this model is exportable and usable anywhere. So the real rationale behind this was to try and drive and deliver community impact. So in the seaweed business, this initiative is just for doing that. Our net result on this, we're still only a couple of years into it, but so far we've managed to uplift farmers' earnings by about 20%. And we've done that, plus, of course, the benefit of doing all of the insurance protections as well. No liquidity for last mile community. The second part of our three-pronged attack is what we do with the microfinance sector. We support financially MICRA, which is it's a World Bank initiative initially that was set up post Aceh tsunami to build capacity. MICRA gives us our community access to what we call last mile communities, 2,500 microfinance institutions throughout Indonesia. Some are agriculture, some are doing rice, all kinds of, some are doing blue economy. But they do a range of things, but the need is the same. A lot of these institutions suffered greatly during COVID. Many of them are still not fully back on their feet. So a big part of our work is how do we provide the liquidity into the last mile communities? And when I say liquidity, I mean sustainable liquidity. So access to funding, access to money at reasonable rates. Excuse me. I think this is a big piece for impact in general. It goes way beyond just the fishing, the agricultural sector. There is a big need to how you access or how you release funds to support last mile communities. If we looked at this in terms of how we physically do it, we are putting together funds in the form of a portal that link MFIs with people, with companies looking to invest in the sector. So this is not the large $10, $20 million funding tranches. This is something very much smaller. But of course, with that, you can bundle protection with it, with the loans. So to make the economy of scale, we're able to go to a lender and say, okay, on the next block of $5 million you're making into the microfinance sector in Philippines, in Indonesia, we'd like to bundle with that some loan protections, A, for you as the lender, but also for the end consumer. That way we begin to drive scale. And the logic in here, and this will come back to, I'm sure Pedro will touch on this later, but the rationale here is with the deteriorating global climate situation, unless we are very careful, coastal communities will be uninsurable 10 years from now. So a big part of the work that we're doing is to how to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we have communities where we can provide the protection that's desperately needed for these communities. Hand in hand with this goes our digital education. You cannot sell finance or be involved in finance or provide finance to people, particularly in last mile communities, unless there is an element of education, financial literacy education that goes hand in hand, explaining what a loan is, explaining what the obligations are on a contract, explaining what's needed for protection in general. So we've developed a mobile app that does that. Now, within the app, the financial literacy piece is already built and some of the DRR elements. So basically, this is putting in the hands of the farmers something that will help build life skills. So the financial literacy obviously is a no-brainer. This is all built on AI and blockchain. So we are moving away from the idea of train the trainer, 1 person to 30. How does microfinance work? How do you make loans? How do you engage? So that individuals can do it on their own, at their own pace and learn in their own way. The sustainable livelihoods will provide lifestyle information. So this could be on a whole range of stuff, whether it's agriculture or blue economy or fisheries or what have you. But it gives you the ability to build your consumer base in terms of knowledge. So, for instance, as we look to evolve our seaweed model from doing just seaweed into other forms of mariculture, i.e. combining seaweed with maybe prawns or milkfish or other forms of aquaculture, this is a way of being able to educate and partner with farmers to impart information. The disaster risk reduction piece is critical, particularly in the areas in which we work with the Philippines and Indonesia, which are horrendously exposed to the risks of earthquake and the typhoon and typhoons in the case of the Philippines. So this is serious, very serious work. This should work hand in hand with microfinance, because the microfinance gives you the piece that creates the liquidity and ultimately the mechanism for paying. I personally feel quite strongly that at grassroots level, it is not sustainable if you purely rely on the government to provide protection in the event of major disaster. You have to get people to take ownership of that themselves. COVID, if there's one thing that COVID taught us, it's that governments have a limited purse, a limited pocket capacity when it comes to natural big disasters, and they have differing priorities. This makes it very difficult for the grassroots communities. The last piece on our mobile app is the health, and the health piece is the next big challenge for us. How we look at it. Again, we feel this should be done hand in hand with the financial piece. There are some very good examples, particularly in markets like Sri Lanka, where microfinance institutions offer health, so they can look blood pressure or they can do diabetes testing in branches. So it's not just about the loans, it's about being able to extend the loan base into health. And that helps also in terms of the gender balance, because as many of the MFIs look to transition their loan base from male to female. So again, these mobile apps help, and they can begin to do this. So in essence, I'm sorry if I've gone on slightly beyond my allotted time, but our ecosystem, what we're trying to deliver for this is essentially liquidity to the last mile. And liquidity that's sustainable, that is reachable and accessible. There is a great need, if you talk to people that fund impact, there's a huge need for finding channels, finding ways of getting money directly to where it's needed. This is one of the things that we work on. Sustainable finance for the nature-based solutions. Our seaweed business has been done as a proof of concept. It's a pilot. We expect other people to take our model, work with us, and accelerate it, because that way we have a chance of being able to feed 11.5 billion people come 2050. Lastly, the digital engagement is about building life skills. It's about facilitating growth. So I think in closing, we live in a shrinking and interconnected world with an accelerating use and also misuse of data. Adopting an ecosystem approach enables us to gradually rebalance agricultural and aquaculture value chains. And by looking at an integrated model, we can begin to measure the impact of the work we do and the impact of these schemes much more effectively. The microfinance piece is absolutely critical, not just for delivering liquidity, but for measuring whether the impact is working. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Graham Clark, for introducing us to such a larger picture and to the awesome KMB ecosystem model. There's much to learn for us. And I hope this kind of solution, end-to-end solutions, financial services solutions that you have introduced to us through this kind of model may benefit the fisherfolk organizations, which are constantly struggling for access to finance.
Well, I think also for Dr. Flower in particular, but this is a model we're trying to develop to share. It will work differently in East Africa to the way it works for Indonesia, for sure. But the idea of using a cooperative framework, I think, works. And I think that's something we've been asked to do something in Europe currently around seaweed. And so I'd be very happy to share what we've got. And if there are ways that we can support one another, it goes without question. And obviously from a protection point of view, the people we work with who help us provide that protection, particularly on the catastrophe level, they'd be happy to work in East Africa too. So I'm very happy to help if we can.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, that would be highly beneficial to a lot of our member organizations. And we will certainly get back to you for a lot of support and learnings. So
you're very welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to join us in spite of your busy schedule. So with this, we will move to the next presentation. I understand Dr. Nikita, Ms. Gavina Kumbaga has yet not been able to join. So I think we will proceed with our both's combined presentation on investing in women-oriented businesses in fisheries and aquaculture. So this is an attempt that is being made by myself and Dr. Nikita, just to broadly sum up the various topics and what is the scope and the potential for investing in this kind of industry. A lot of it also has been consolidated based on the information that has been shared related with the risks from the researcher's point of view, as well as based on the desk research that we have done. So we'll just walk you all through that. Are you able to see our screen?
Yes, not on full screen, but yeah, okay.
Now it's full screen, Pedro?
Yes.
Okay. So just to give you a global overview on the women's participation in fisheries and aquaculture, as already shared by Matteo in his presentation, but about 59 million people are employed in the primary sector that includes fisheries and aquaculture, of which 35% are as primary producers are involved in aquaculture, whereas in fishing related area, it's 65%. And the contribution of women is approximately 21%. And as Matteo has said in his presentation, about 50% of the women are engaged in the post-harvest sector. And based on the first sale value, as you can see, that is contributed by this overall sector is about 424 billion, which is there. And about small scale fisheries, which is the dominant, which contributes to this entire production, is about 77 billion from the small scale fishing communities, that is it. But overall, about 600 million people's livelihoods is directly, indirectly, as part-time, full-time, and as occasional workers. The livelihood of about 600 million people is dependent on this sector. So Matteo has already provided insights on the contribution of women in this. But just to highlight a little bit more, 4 out of 10 people engaged are in small-scale fisheries are women. And as I think a lot of other presentations, particularly on cephalopod fishery, which was there, as well as the gleaning activities and the seaweeds and sea cucumbers. So there's a lot of contribution of women in the commercial harvesting, which includes in the intratidal zones, as well as using the absolutely low gear and the invertebrate fisheries also, which also constitutes a part of the commercial fisheries. So this is actually one of my favorite slides, which I have been sharing right from the time when I started my career as a researcher and a trainer and a professor in an academic university, where we had to talk about what's the role of women, or what's the involvement of women in fisheries and aquaculture businesses. Because the general thing is, okay, women are only in, post-harvest or, but these are the broad areas that are actually listed. And Dr. Nikita can also add a little bit on this later on. But, and then from assistant professor, when I moved to the financial services industry, so this slide was equally helpful to bring forth the opportunities for investments in this sector. So, as you can see in the marine fisheries sector, these are the broad range of activities that women are involved in, but right from purchase of small traditional fishing vessels, motorization or improvisation of the traditional fishing vessels, fish net weaving and mending, cleaning, of course. Then the coastal and freshwater inland aquaculture, which is also one of the biggest contributors for the fisheries and aquaculture businesses. And the various culture systems. Fisheries is, and it's not just, aquaculture is not just about, doing the culture in the ponds, but there are various other culture systems that are there, including the cage and pen culture, which is also applicable in the mariculture or in the marine ocean side. Then women also, as discussed in the previous presentations, the post-harvest sector activities are dominated by women. But it not just includes the sorting and braiding and filleting, the traditional, but now they are actively engaged in solar dryer purchases, or the various improvised technologies for fish brining, fish smoking, and of course the marketing support, where there are opportunities where women also buy fish transport vehicles. So there are other fish stalls which need support of refrigeration, storage units, weighing machines, fish bone cutting machines, and equipments which are required. Dr. Nikita, in case if I may have missed out on any other activities that you may want to add.
Yeah, not much. You have sort of covered everything, but just like to add that a lot of gleaning, the majority of gleaning that happens is done by women, which has already come in the previous presentations that we saw. And much of the work is in the informal sort of sector. There's a lot of unpaid family labor that goes into fish value chains that is sort of not recognized and acknowledged. So I think those aspects also need to be taken into account when we talk of women's work in fisheries and aquaculture. So, yeah. Can we go to the next?
Yeah. So here we have tried to put the occupational hazards and risks faced. A lot of it has been discussed, but we tried to kind of put them together, categorize them into the biological, chemical, as well as the physical injuries which are there. So based on the causes and what are the effects of that. So Nikita, do you want to kind of take us through?
Actually, again, I think these have come much more clearly in the presentations that we have already seen. We've just taken some of them to sort of classify it from the, to-do point of view, like from the financial and insurance solutions that need to come out. So when they look at hazards in a particular way. But also, we need, from the presentation that we just had from Mr. Graham, we understand that we need to look at it much more holistically and also in specific contexts when we actually look for solutions. So fundamentally, these hazards are related to the type of work we do, work women do, and whether it is fish harvesting or whether it is processing or whether it is marketing or being engaged in aquaculture activities. So if we look at the biological and chemical hazards that we come across, it could be due to infestations, parasites or pathogens in various systems, which came out very clearly. And also smoking, which is a very important activity, traditional processing activity that women are involved in several parts of the world. That is a leading cause of several breath-related issues as well as cancer. And also there are a lot of disinfectant chemicals that are used, maybe not in the quantities or in the volumes that are there in the standards, but it could be more or less. So these are some of the biological and chemical hazards that women face. Can we have the next slide? For physical injuries, again, there are a wide range of physical injuries that happen also because of the ergonomics of the work due to standing or squatting for several hours when they are engaged in either processing or fishing or marketing. So injuries could be small injuries like stings and cuts and sprains, or very, very major injuries due to slips and falls that can happen due to wet, slippery floors and the environment that processing happens. Or it could be dust related from release from, say, rice bran or fish feed in the mills that they work in, or in the aquaculture systems that they work in. Or you can have, as I said, working positions when they sit or squat for long hours or stand for long hours. They can have issues with the back, spine, neck, leg, and head. So these are the physical sort of hazards that lead to health issues in women. Also in aquaculture systems, we can roughly it's the next slide. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, in aquaculture businesses, or if you look at, we have natural hazards like floods or droughts or cyclones or tidal waves and other changes that are happening also because of climate change. Then we have broadly the biological, chemical hazards, and some of them are technical hazards due to mechanical breakdowns or accidental damage of machinery or breakdown of other related inputs. And then, of course, we have some social hazards like, which are voluntarily done. There are malicious acts, there's theft, etc., which can impact the aquaculture systems that women or small-scale producers work in. So some of them are sort of common across. They're not really, based on gender. It can happen to both men and women, but some are very, very specific to women. And why we're talking of women is that some of these have not been taken into account or recognized at all. So I think that is why we are focusing on the occupational hazards of women today. Yeah.
So, so also I just wanted to bring it to the notice that women in fisheries and aquacultures, also in the post-harvest activities, they are not only exposed to freezing, extreme freezing conditions, the wet biological conditions, but also sometimes the excess heat waves that are there. And we found a couple of initiatives that are currently also being implemented for women in the informal sector who are, maybe dairy workers and all. But also, we would like to draw the attention that these women have been, women in this sector have constantly been working under these adverse conditions, and possibly not just about heat waves, but also the other frozen conditions and frost or ice burns that are there. along with all the other biological and the physical injuries that they're exposed to, which is quite intense as compared to other agri-based sector too. So these are some of the strong recommendations that we have tried to put down, particularly for the insurance service sector for provision of services. So the first, and I think it's also been covered and spoken in the previous presentations, that it is really important to develop a sectoral understanding about the unique business characteristics of the fisheries and aquaculture sector, and particularly the small-scale fisheries communities and the sector in general. So that is one. And the way we can go about as also it's about the alliances with women member-based fisherfolk organizations, as Dr. Graham was saying, the cooperative models and that, understanding, and that synergy needs to happen. And certainly the establishing linkages with microfinance and credit institutions. There's so much of microfinance services that are being provided at the last mile. And if you see the microfinance reports, also women are the biggest borrowers across the world. So this could be one of the establishing the linkages for the insurance service industry with these kinds of institutions. And these recommendations have also been highlighted in the reports that we're going to talk about. Nikita, do you have any other? Okay. So the broad recommendations that we have highlighted are, as already mentioned, understand the businesses and the conditions of these women who are involved in this sector. So the purpose of organizing this webinar is also to kind of start thinking through and draw attention and see how women insurance customized products can be developed specifically through by establishing the direct linkages with the insurance and credit programs or bundling the products. And I think a lot of experiences, and it's also been documented that bundling of insurance with credit program, particularly for this kind of communities and the sector, particularly in the small scale fisheries, can be a good starting point also, because it can also act as a collateral for the loan. And it's also easy to communicate at the same time, because given the unique business characteristics and the challenges of time that they have. Certainly to complement the fisheries, next is there's a need to complement the assets with the health and life insurance products too. And one of the, based on also the evidence-based research that we have conducted, we found that there needs to be a flexibility in the insurance payment, premium payments, as well as the effective claim settlement process also, because the understanding about insurance is really low. So this could be a way to kind of attract this kind of population. And certainly an efficient and simple dispute settlement process is equally there, because in cases like aquaculture businesses where insurers do not provide full stock mortality insurance, for example, only a partial stock mortality insurance is covered. So this can create an adversity for a small scale producer who stock. So different solutions could be thought over for this kind of insurance. And the most important is creating the awareness, networking support, which is required both at the national and international levels, where we call upon not just insurance industry, both public and private insurance industry, but also the development organizations, which are trying to facilitate, and with so much of focus on the SDG 14, with the investments are absolutely low. So that's how, certain initiatives can be developed, particularly to support. And there are organizations, as you can see, like ZASTI, which started with from 30 to 500 processors. And there's far more potential with so many other women-based organizations for capacity building. So these have also been documented in our reports for the sorry. Okay. So these are some of the broad publications that we have done to advocate, create awareness on the insurance, both at capture fisheries and aquaculture insurance. Under the FAO's Blue Finance Guidance Notes, we've also developed policy briefs on insurance for small-scale fisheries, as well as aquaculture insurance for small-scale producers. And there are much more other publications which are in the pipeline, but the most latest one that we have is the World Review of Capture Fisheries and Aquaculture Insurance. It has been released last year. And here about CAFI has contributed to about 5 countries in Asia on the insurance scenarios. And as you can see, FAO has been talking about insurance for aquaculture as well as capture fisheries from 2006 onwards. And the situation has improved, but when it comes to the small scale fisheries and aquaculture producers, not much has changed. Also, but the insurance industries have, insurance providers have moved to various geographies, and a lot of countries have opened up the insurance markets. But there is much more scope for the insurance industry to work in this sector with the kind of potential that we have of about more than approximately 600 million population, which is documented. So Nikita, do you want to talk about the GAF's initiatives also on the cooperative plan?
Thank you, Suchitra. I think we are coming to the end of the session. And it's really heartening to see that the voices of fish women, from the work point of view, is now being heard and discussed. Though they've been so much part of the fish value chains, the other stakeholders have not been looking at it from the angle that it needs to be required. And also, it's very heartening to see the efforts that are already underway in the form of frameworks and models, which I think can be replicated. We in the Gender in Aquaculture and Fisheries section of the Asian Fisheries Society, we firmly believe in promoting equitable, effective interaction and cooperation among all stakeholders. And that's why we were very happy to associate with this particular webinar, which I must say, Suchitra took a lot of effort to bring together. GAFS has over the past 2.5 decades, we have provided a platform for people to present and discuss their work. It was a very informal group. We formalized only in 2017, but we have grown from strength to strength, taking our very small but very important steps in our sector. And we also take a lot of effort in bringing out the publications of all our conference presentations, which is widely disseminated. And we have now a very sizable body of work, which is excellent reference material and guide for diverse stakeholders. I request all of you to please visit our website to get more information on that. In 2018, we had actually conducted a webinar on women's, specifically on women's work in fisheries, which we titled Women Work in Fisheries 2. And through that, as a result of that, we have brought out a cooperative action plan, which you can see on the slide, which focuses basically on women's work and also gives directions for policy advocacy and the program needs of women's labor and work. As I already mentioned, we specifically work to promote interaction between among all stakeholders working in and interested in gender in fisheries and aquaculture. And we want greater visibility and increased awareness for incorporating gender in intervention and also to contribute to the development of these issues within these sectors. Besides publication and dissemination, we regularly hold the GAF conferences, the last one in 2022, that is last year. We had delegates from 26 countries participating, and we are really happy to note that the scope of work and the content of work that is being done globally is really remarkable now. And we also provide further opportunities for seeking collaboration with stakeholders like this one. We have collaborated with CAFI-SSF, and we also carry out projects which we actively pursue or also are specifically contacted to conduct, basically because we have a vast pool of experts and practitioners in our membership. So I think this can be the beginning of a very fruitful association to see how we can bring in financial solutions and products to highlight and focus on women's work in the sector. So that's about it, I think, from the GAFIS side. We wish that the dialogue continues, and we can reflect and address the issues of women's work in aquaculture and fisheries value chains. Thank you.
So thank you from both of us for giving us the time to present our thoughts and to see how we can all work collaboratively. With this, we will move to the next presentation, and I would like to introduce Mr. Pedro Pinheiro, the project manager, Microinsurance Network. And without whose support, we were quite adamant that we wanted to collaborate with the Microinsurance Network and the IDF, particularly for this topic, and also to, bring in more insurance industry stakeholders, because without MIN's support and IDF support, we would not have been kind of, organize this program, and also to bring Mr. Graham Clark on board, who has shared such a wonderful presentation about the model. So Pedro, without taking much of your time, I would over to you for the way forward on the IDF country strategies for scaling up microinsurance projects.
Thank you very much, Suchitra. I'd like to thank all the organizers for this opportunity of collaborating here. I had prepared a 5-minute presentation, but I think I'll be quicker than that because we're a bit over time. I think part of my role has been fulfilled here through Graham's participation. We introduced Graham because we had learned about the project he's doing when we did the workshop in Indonesia, and I felt it was very aligned with the purpose of this workshop. I also saw Graham is a member of the Inclusive Insurance Working Group of the IDF, and I also saw some other both IDF and MIN members in the audience. So I think that's part of our objective achieved here. I'd like to introduce myself and perhaps leave the channel open for follow-up with the participants. My name is Pedro. I'm the coordinator of the Inclusive Insurance Working Group of the IDF. And the IDF, the Insurance Development Forum, is a public-private collaboration between the insurance industry and multiple international organizations that are working in the insurance space. Which means the World Bank, the UN, and many other civil society organizations. And the objective of the IDF is ultimately to deliver risk management and insurance protection to people on the ground. The IDF subscribes to Insure Resilience Vision 2025 of extending insurance protection to 500 million people, out of which 150 million people should be covered with micro insurance protection. So that's where the Inclusive Insurance Working Group comes in. We have a list of focus countries that we've been working on. We started with Indonesia with a virtual workshop. Then we went on to Kenya, Senegal, and the Philippines. And these last two workshops had a very strong component focused on fishery activities, because that's a major economic segment in those countries. And I have some outputs from those workshops to share if anyone in the audience is interested. But I think the message here is that The findings are very aligned from what we've collected in the workshops. We're not doing these workshops just for the sake of doing workshops and coming up with another gap assessment. The ultimate objective is to create meaningful connections out of those workshops and bring together organizations such as the organizers here and insurance providers or aggregators that can effectively roll out projects that will deliver protection to people on the ground. So that's why I say part of the objective has been fulfilled with this coming together, and we want to continue the conversation, considering all the inputs that were provided here that will certainly be incorporated into the reports that I'm producing, that will guide the activities in the countries where we're sort of rolling out these interventions. So I will leave my email on the chat. I can share the presentation with some more details about the IDF to be sent to the participants, but I would love to continue talking to the organizers and to anyone in the audience who's interested about how we can effectively create insurance products and bridge the gap between these organizations that are working together with fisherfolk and understanding their insurance needs with the insurance providers that can effectively put those products together. So thank you very much, and looking forward to our next interactions.
Thank you. Thank you, Pedro. We are open for any Q&A, if any participants may have. Else, if I understand this is a completely new topic, which is also there because there's much to discuss and kind of, understand about the women insurance product. But we can allot, I know we are running behind time, but still, if any participants may have any questions, otherwise you can also feel free to write to us, or you can also write, Pedro has already shared his email ID, you can write to him too. We all can learn together. I think there are no questions at this point. People are still absorbing the fact that being a new subject, and I think I also have personally learned a lot through this. And so let's continue this discussion. And so Dr. Nikita, over to you, if you have any other comments before we close the session.
Not really, Suchitra. I would just echo Pedro saying that we need to keep the communication going. There is a lot of information on what is needed, and there is also this group of people who can provide for the need. I think bringing this platform sort of, it's a first attempt to bring the two together to really work towards the solutions. And we have some very wonderful solutions already in the field, so I think which can be replicated. Yeah. Thank you all really for attending.
I so agree with you. Yeah, the solutions are very much around. It's just we need to bring them all together to work it out. So with this, I think then let's close the program today. And I would like to thank each one of the co-organizers today. Dr. Nikita, we've been talking about this for almost over 8 to 9 months, and I'm glad we could finally work this out. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pedro, for associating with, supporting us, I would rather say. It's been a year when we started talking, and I'm glad finally we kind of came together to organize this. And finally, thank you to FAO too, to provide their contributions and insights for this program. So thank you one and all, and to all the participants who have joined us on a Monday morning in spite of that schedules. But yes, and we will be putting up our recordings and all the presentations on the Rural Finance Investment Learning Center website that we have. And we'll also be sharing all the presentation details with all participants. We had about over 120 people registered. But clearly that means there is a lot of interest, and we will try to share it with those who have not been able to attend also with us. So with this, thank you once again for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Graham. Mr. Graham Clark. I know you have corrected us, but
thank you for my promotion. I am much appreciated. We can just say I'll just take the honorary title. My
thank
pleasure.
you, Dr.
I look forward to staying engaged, and thank you, Pedro, for bringing us together.
Thank you, Dr. Flower, for joining us from Zanzibar. I know you had the challenges of the power issues, but we could overcome that in spite of the adverse situations. We still kind of are resilient, and we've joined together.
Thank you.
Shelika is not with us, but I would like to thank her, and Ms. Maryam for joining us today and taking the time. So thank you one and all. Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening. Yeah,
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Flower.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.